ॐ वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्. So we will continue from our previous class, which was in November 2nd, where we had just begun chapter 14, which is a very interesting chapter, which is also known as Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. That is, there are three gunas which constitute Prakriti. The whole of Prakriti is constituted of three basic gunas: Rajas, Sattva, and Tamas. So they have different functions, and based on the different functions or permutations and combinations of these three gunas, each element or each living being acquires its particular characteristic. So, guna means the nature, which by virtue of the combinations, different combinations, each element in this manifest universe, uh, which is also known as Prakriti or nature, is made of these three gunas. So this chapter is known as the yoga of the division of these three gunas, what these gunas do, and what is the purpose of knowing these gunas. Because as I have mentioned repeatedly, each chapter of Bhagavad Gita is a yoga. It is an independent means, or in combination with other chapters and other yogas, it can lead you to the goal. But each one of them can independently lead you to the highest goal, that is supreme knowledge. So, supreme knowledge which leads you to freedom or mukti, that is the goal of all the yogas. So, here the first two verses which we briefly discussed in our previous class on 2nd November, that was Jnana, the knowledge of this Gunatraya Vibhaga. It's like this particular chapter discusses a specific kind of knowledge. The knowledge that we discuss Sankhya Yoga in the second chapter, the third chapter, fourth chapter, each one of them leads us to the knowledge that will make us free ultimately. But the means, the paths are different. The means are different, but the goal is the same. So the first two verses will, as we see in the case of other chapters, will point out that Jnana helps true knowledge, that is the highest knowledge, it helps us to be free. Mukti. It aids mukti. Then we come to this process of birth. How birth, according to the different combinations of guna, give rise to the different characteristics, the different species that we see. That the process of birth, Prakriti itself is a creative principle. So, mukti means you stop that creative principle from diversifying and causing more and more sorrow. So, according to Sankhya, according to Vedanta, the common idea is the more there is creation, the more there will be complications in our life. So, though from the worldly point of view, creativity is encouraged, but according to yoga, according to the science of yoga, according to the spiritual principles of Vedanta and yoga and Sankhya and all the philosophies, this creative principle, though it is inevitable in the case of Prakriti, Prakriti itself, the feminine nature of Prakriti itself leads to the creativity that we see around us. It's the feminine principle that gives rise to creation. She is the mother of all, as sometimes they refer to Prakriti as the universal mother, because she is creative and she gives rise to creation. But creation always need not be a very desirable thing. According to Vedanta, it's not a very desirable thing because ultimately creation for a time it's fine. But when creation leads to destruction, which will happen, something has to be destroyed so that it can be recreated in some other form. So that is the uniform principle of Prakriti. So when the destruction comes, that is when sorrow comes, or when the destruction is approaching. So no matter how dear an object or a being or anything that is part of Prakriti, however dear it may be, one day it has to be destroyed and something else will be created in its place. So it's a cyclic type of existence. That is why in Hindu philosophy, this samsara, that which moves, that which is transformed because of the varying different gunas, as we shall see now, how the gunas function. The very nature of this changing universe is creation, which ultimately leads to to destruction. And if you don't understand that principle and don't transcend it, then we will suffer sorrow. That is why they call this worldly cycle samsara chakra. So we have to be free from this cycle of birth and death. That is moksha. That is the only idea which is common in all these chapters, that ultimately the knowledge of all these gunas, of everything, the kshetrajna, which we discussed in the 13th chapter, all this lower knowledge, when knowledge of the lower things, that is knowledge of Prakriti, is to find out ways and means how we can be freed from the clutches of Prakriti. So it's like, if you want to know how to get rid of the disease, you should first know the genesis of the disease. How does the disease come? How does it attack us, or in how does it uh, how does it come to us in the first place? Once you know that, then you can think of the remedy. So similarly, the process of how these gunas give rise to the different creative things, the creation itself, the functions, what are the different functions of the three gunas? What are the different symptoms? What does the preponderance of a particular guna do to you? If there is more sattva, what happens? If there is more rajas, what happens? If there is more tamas. So the different gunas influence us differently. Not only the inanimate things, but animate things, as well as our minds, which is finer matter. So even our minds are made of gunas. So the different qualities, the different feelings that we have, they're all products of the combination of these gunas. And then finally, the next few verses will show how transcending the gunas leads to freedom from these gunas and mukti. So, and the definition finally, this is very common. You saw in the second chapter also. When Arjuna was told the different qualities of a sthita prajna, he said, how do I identify a sthita prajna if I see one such person who has transcended the gunas, or transcended, in the second chapter, it is one who has become a sthita prajna, a man of steady wisdom. That is how it is translated. So, how does a man of steady wisdom live? How does he act? How does he talk? How does he walk? So, because Arjuna is keen to know what are the characteristics of one who is Sthita Prajna, here, the definition of one who has transcended the gunas, what happens to such a person is also described. And then we conclude the whole 14th chapter will be concluded. So we just briefly touched upon the first two verses. I'll just read it. I'll not will not explain because we have done it already. So the Lord starts, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, Param Bhuya Pravakshyami Jnananam Jnanamuttamam Yat Gyatva Munaya Sarve Param Siddhim Ito Gataha. Means what it means is, I declare again and again. Means he has declared earlier, but in a different way, in a different paradigm or different uh, context. He is now again repeating that same jnana, what he did in the second chapter and all the previous chapters. He says, I am telling you the supreme Param Bhuya. I am the supreme jnana, that supreme knowledge, the best of all forms of knowledge, by knowing which all the sages have passed from this world, means who have left this world. Munaya sarve param gatim, param siddhim. They have reached perfection after this life. After this life, this physical life, they have given up this physical life. That's passed from this world to the highest perfection. That is the verse 1. Now that is the second verse which we discussed was idam jnanam upashitya, means having attained to this knowledge, idam jnanam upashitya mama sardh मम साधर्म्य साधर्म्य आगताः सर्गेपि नो उपजायन्ते प्रलयते न व्यतन्ति च, means they who have devoted myself themselves, those who have devoted themselves to this particular knowledge which he is going to describe, have attained to unity with me. Here me means the supreme self, not me as the personal uh, Ishta, that is Krishna. Of course, Krishna is referring to, when he says me from this state of mind, he refers to the Supreme Self. Those who have devoted to me, idam jnanam upashritya. Upashritya means having taken refuge in. Ashritya. Ashraya means to take refuge. Those who uh, take refuge means those who follow this particular highest knowledge. Among all the different knowledge systems, this is the highest. And if they attain or take refuge in this, mama sadharmyam means they attain some kind of unity with the Supreme Self, having attained to Sarga at the time of creation, even if they are in that cycle of birth and death, they are never born again. That means they get mukti. That's the goal of all the yogas, all the chapters of the Gita. And they, at the time of dissolution, means at the time of death, na vyathanti, they are not disturbed. They are not disturbed in the sense they are the disturbance that one faces. That's why in the Gita it is said that the last thought that uh, is present when you are just about to leave the body determines your future birth. So those who are not disturbed, they pass away very peacefully. They are not disturbed at the time of dissolution. So they pass away knowing fully, full of knowledge of the things. They know that what that which is created has to be uh, dissolved or destroyed at some point. So they are not disturbed. They are not disturbed by the idea of dissolution of the body. So Sri Ramakrishna, as I mentioned last time, gives a beautiful example. He says, boiled paddy, if it is sown in a field, it will give rise to another crop. So the cycle of creation and destruction goes on. But if you, by some means, you boil that paddy and then sow the paddy, then it will not propagate, that it will not be, it will lose its creative faculty. So the man bathed in the fire of Brahma Jnana is not troubled, because the whole thoughts and the other samskaras are the seeds. That is why it is known as bija. Just as we know the bija mantra, there is the science of bija mantra. So there is a science of these seeds which are responsible for our rebirth. So they are in seed form. So unless that those seeds are destroyed, the paddy has been destroyed. Sri Ramakrishna says when they find a suitable soil, or when they find a suitable atmosphere, water, nourishment and all, no matter how long they are lying in the soil, they will sprout, and then they'll give rise to creation. Then again they will be destroyed, then they'll be created. But that ignorant person who is not like the boiled paddy, he is like unboiled, that is just paddy seeds, dried but not but capable of being uh, creative, or capable of being of sprouting and growing into a fresh plant. That is what the nature of the ignorant one is. He cannot escape. He has to, someday or the other, he will be He has to born again. So how is this cycle of birth kept up? So that is the verse which we will discuss today. And then Sri Ramakrishna also says, what happens when one gets this jnana? He gives a beautiful example. As I said, all these prophets, all these great teachers, they don't teach by teaching intricate philosophies. They just give beautiful examples. He said, what happens when one gets this jnana? He says there was a doll of salt. The doll has its individuality. It has its shape, it has a form. And that doll, of course, this is just a example that he is giving. You have to understand it figuratively. So that doll of salt was consigned to the sea, or it jumped into the sea to measure the depth of the sea. But unfortunately, when any form or any shape, no matter which shape it is, when it is dropped into water or the sea, it will melt. So there was, he identifies that doll identified with the whole sea, though it was produced from the sea. By a certain process, salt is extracted from the sea, but when it is dropped into the sea or when it jumps into the sea to measure the depth, it cannot come and tell you how deep the sea is, the nature of the sea. It melts. So transmigration is like that. As long as you retain your individuality, the jivahood, you don't get mukti. But once you become one with the sea, but how is this cycle of birth kept up? Now that is mukti is a different issue. So what happens as a result of jnana, he explains. But now, how is the cycle of birth kept up? Means, why are we born again and again? Can all not get mukti? That would be a very nice thing. But he says, he gives the example. He says, Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadamyaham sambhava sarvabhutanam tato bhavati bharata. So he says, Mama yoni, my womb, that is the great Brahma. Brahma is supposed to be the god of. He is supposed to of the triad that Indian philosophy describes. God has three functions. One is creation, preservation, and destruction. So each one is assigned a particular duty. Brahma is one who creates. Vishnu is one who, according to Indian mythology, Vishnu is one who perpetuates or preserves. And finally, Shiva has to come and destroy. I mean, Prakriti or the physical. Of course, the Atman or Purusha is indestructible. They are talking of the creation now. So, how does Prakriti create? So, through the agency of Brahma, Mahat Brahma, the great Brahma, Tasmin, in that Garbham, germ, Dadami, I place the germ of creation in that Brahma. And then the Sambhava, the birth, Sarva Bhutanam, all the beings, inanimate as well as animate beings, are born out of that. So that is the first verse. And then that is the same thing which we discussed, that Kshetra and Kshetrajna, one who knows the previous chapter, if you recollect. So that pure consciousness somehow gets as if one becomes many in Prakriti. That which was one, the one Purusha, the one Atma Chaitanya, or the one uh, consciousness, which is undivided, appears to be divided into so many small bits of consciousness. They get, as it were, they are not actually trapped, they cannot be trapped. But the jivas feel that this Prakriti, the three gunas are binding them, and the individualities start growing, then fighting with each other, quarreling, and ultimately destroying each other. So, everything in this universe which has birth gets a temporary sort of identification with that Chaitanya. That is why it is known Kshetra Kshetragna. In the previous chapter, if you recollect, Kshetragna, through the Kshetra, the field means the Prakriti. He takes It is also known as, it is given a technical name of Hiranyagarbha. Garbha means the womb. Hiranya means the bright womb of creation. Whether you call it in scientific terms the Big Bang, or so many things are uh, described in the various ways material scientists try to describe it, but none of them is a complete explanation. Nobody is capable of explaining this, because it is this Prakriti is as much a mystery as this Purusha. Purusha, of course, is an obvious fact. The pure consciousness. We are living in we are conscious every moment of our life. But unfortunately, we identify with the changing consciousness of the jiva. But we are the pure consciousness. We are the kshetrajna. But we confuse ourselves with the kshetra or the field. Similarly, we are Purusha or we are Brahman, but we mistakenly identify ourselves with this salt doll till it is dissolved. When the salt doll is dissolved, it becomes one with the sea, that is, one with the universal consciousness. So the variations that you see in life, that is being explained now by Sri Krishna. Why are there different grades? Some have reached a particular state, some of them are still in a primitive state, some of them want to be free. The variation and gradations is because of these gunas. So these are caused by different desires. So one who is full of rajasic desires wealth, money, power, he will have more of rajas. So he is born in a rajasic family. Those who are sattvic, those who are born, that is why Sri Krishna in an earlier chapter, Arjuna is afraid. He said, after all these spiritual practices, if I die before reaching the goal, what will happen to me? So he says, no, don't worry. Unlike the other things that you gather around yourself, the wealth, the buildings, and all those things which you unfortunately have to leave behind, the gross things, this subtle spiritual attainment will not be lost. It is like a fixed deposit which you can encash in the next birth. And he promises him that you will be born as a result of your spiritual practices in a sattvic family or in a yogis family, in a family of yogis, or uh, a family where you don't have to struggle for existence. That is the idea. They say it is Srimatam. Srimatam means not just physical wealth, a happy, prosperous family where you have enough uh, your material needs have been fulfilled so that you can focus on higher things. So that is the idea. So he says none of your spiritual practices, unlike the worldly things that you acquire, have to be left behind. After death, they continue because they are subtle in nature. So consequently, the jivas, when they are born with different aptitudes and temperaments because of the preponderance of the gunas in the previous birth. So it's not that somebody is born sattvic. It's not a freak of nature. It is that which they have worked for in the previous life. So whatever they have worked for, nothing is lost. Unfortunately, unlike the material acquisitions, those things are carried over to the next birth. That's why he says the next stanza clarifies this fact, that how these jivatmas are born with infinite number of aptitudes and temperament. No two persons are same because of these gunas. Sarvayonishu kaunteya murtaya sambhavanti yaha tasam brahma mahadyoni raham bija pradapitaha. He says, whatever forms are produced that you see, O Kaunteya. Kaunteya means son of Kunti, that is Arjuna. In any wombs whatsoever, it may be an animal, it may be an insect, wherever a form is produced, whatever be the form that is produced, the great Brahma, that means the Prakriti, the creator. Prakriti is the creator, Prakriti is the preserver. Prakriti is Brahma, Prakriti is Vishnu in a different function. And when it does another function of destroying the physical, he is Shiva or Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara. So the great Brahma is their womb. From there all the creation starts. And I am the seed giving father. Bija Pradap Pitaha. So, as Prakriti, that is why they call that Prakriti as Avyakta Prakriti or Parama Prakriti. We have a beautiful verse. We discussed this on Holy Mother's birthday. Prakritim Paramam. She is also Prakriti, but she is a different type of Prakriti. There is a Parama Prakriti and there is a lower Prakriti. Lower Prakriti is nature. It is the Parama Prakriti which is one with Brahman, which gives rise to this whole creation. And the whole idea of our mantra sadhana, the bija which we use, is to take the reverse process and go back to the Purusha, the Prakriti, though it gives rise to variety, diversity, and in its wake, it gives rise to suffering. Again, there is this same Prakriti with the help of its gunas, the positive guna, sattva guna, takes you back to that seed giving father, that is Paramatma or Purusha. So they are providing these graded beings that you see is they are sprouting into different species, but the original intent is that of Brahma, the bees, the birds, the insects, the vegetables, everything. Prakriti is the cosmic mother. That is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say you have to somehow please Prakriti. Because since you are a product of Prakriti, you need her grace to come out of that Prakriti. If she can bind you, she can also free you. So she is the cosmic mother. And how does this Prakriti bind the jivas? First of all, the process is explained in the next verse. Now, these are verse number 5 to 10. 5 to 10 is the whole process. Of course, we know the source. It is the Parama Prakriti which gives rise to the lower Prakriti. But how does that process actually take place? So, the now this chapter, Arjuna or Krishna will introduce the concept of gunas. So first he defines what are the three gunas, because of the combinations of which all this creation wide variety is seen in this universe. Sattvam rajas tama iti gunaha prakriti sambhavaha nibadnanti mahabaho dehe dehinam avyayam. Now the three gunas are named here for the first time: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Of course, these three gunas are mentioned in the some of the Upanishads, but it is a very unique idea of Gita. These three gunas, with so much details, has not been described or defined anywhere. Even in the Upanishads, they speak of these three gunas. Gunas literally means ropes, that which bind. So the function of the gunas is to bind. Some bind tightly, some bind loosely, but it is the gunas which normally the various combinations of guna that bind a jiva. So sattva, rajas, and tamas, these gunas, O mighty armed born of Prakriti, means he is now telling him, you may be mightily armed. Sattvam, rajas, tamaha, iti gunaha, these three gunas, Prakriti sambhava, born of Prakriti. Nibadnanti, it even binds the mighty like you. Mahabaho is deliberately using. See, Krishna is using different adjectives to call Arjuna by different names. Mahabaho means one who is a very strong person, mightily armed. So he is giving an idea that no matter how strong a general you may be in the field of battle, we are still bound by Prakriti. So he's showing him his rightful place in this whole play of Prakriti. He says, "Oh, mightily armed, you may be mightily armed in the eyes of the people whom you are fighting, but at the same time, you yourself are bound. They bind, these three gunas are stronger than what you can imagine. They bind the indestructible embodied one fast in the body. So to connect, to bind the indestructible Purusha in within this body and to make them, even though mistakenly think that they are the body, they are strong, they are weak, they are good, they are bad. All these gunas give you an semblance of a personality. However mighty you may be, these gunas are strong enough to bind you. So Prakriti is made of three gunas. They are not just superimposed like uh, superimposed on Prakriti. They are the very nature of Prakriti. So Prakriti, it's the three gunas are part and parcel of Prakriti. This you should understand. It's not that Prakriti takes these three gunas and binds you. So that is the idea. So the how it binds is something which we have to understand. So for that you have to understand the nature of these three gunas, different natures. They are totally different in their characteristic and the way they bind a person. The characteristics are now, after having defined given the names of these three and telling Arjuna that no matter how mightily armed and strong you are, you yourself are bound by these three gunas, like all other creatures, small or big. So, tatra sattvam nirmalatvat. So now it is describing how the three gunas bind a person. Tatram's person or anything in this universe, they are made of three gunas. Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat. Nirmalatvat means because of its purity and stainlessness, we call it sattva. Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat. Prakasham, the other quality of sattva is that it is prakasha means it sheds some kind of light. It's not just the physical light, but it is some kind of knowledge, some kind of wisdom. So sattva, wherever sattva is present, that person is wise or that creature is wise, that has wisdom as one of the main characteristics because of its luminous nature, and its that luminous nature is because of purity. If there are stains, if the Sri Ramakrishna is to give that example of a glass, if it is a colored glass, less light will percolate. If it is a bright, colorless, without color, a glass, transparent glass, then the light shines through brightly. So this sattva is of the nature of light, it is of the nature, it is luminous because it is pure. There is no shade or no color to it. And it's giving the example of a glass. Anamayam, because it is healthy. Sukha Sangena, how does it attach? Sattva also attaches you, Rajas also attaches you. So each guna attaches you or binds you in a different way. The binding of sattva is better than rajas. Binding of rajas is better than tamas. We'll see that now. It binds you by attachment to happiness. Whatever gives us happiness. Happiness means a happiness, refined happiness, not bliss. It's a refined happiness which we get. Say somebody is reading a book, somebody is enjoying some beautiful piece of art or some music. It's a kind of refined happiness. It's not a crude happiness like eating or eating or enjoying a sweet or a feast after which you fall sick. It's some higher form of happiness. That is why it says Sukha Sangena. So those who are tamasic or sattvic, they are attached not by crude enjoyment, but they are enjoyments, but they are attached by happiness. Badnati, it binds you. Jnana Sangena, attachment to knowledge. What do you mean by attachment? Attachment to lower forms of knowledge. Like to read books. A sattvic person would rather read books than just go and socialize and go to a party and spend some time. Rajasic people or tamasic people may do that. But a sattvic person would like to sit in a peaceful corner and he enjoys. Now, if you tell a sattvic rajasic person or a tamasic person, he'll say, what kind of foolish enjoyment is that? He's just sitting in solitude, just wasting his time. He's not even mixing with anyone, but he finds a higher kind of happiness. Now, how can you deny? If people find happiness, if they want to be quiet and they get joy It's not that a person suffers by being in solitude. Some people desire solitude. Some people desire some kind of higher joy, like painting, like listening to music in silence, or even doing japa meditation. They get some higher joy. Otherwise, why will they do that? Without joy, as the Upanishad says, nobody does anything if he doesn't get joy. The question is whether they seek lower joy or higher joy. That's all. Everybody seeks bliss because that is our very nature of the jiva. So it seeks, but when it finds a higher joy, it gives up the lower joy. When a child is very happy when he gets a chocolate or a Cadbury or something which it thinks it gives him a lot of joy. But when it tastes other higher things, it you can't cajole a grown-up youth by giving him the same chocolates which he enjoyed when he was a child, because he has outgrown the joy of eating a chocolate or something which gave him joy, or playing with some small toys. So he is seeking something higher. He is going from tamas to rajas, and then from rajas to still higher. Then he finds even all that joy, that the joy which the noise gave him, all the noise of the world which he thought was joy, ultimately it catches up with him, and then he feels a sort of pain, and then he seeks to go to a quiet place, a place where he gets a higher kind of joy. Otherwise, why will people turn to meditation? If it doesn't give them joy, nobody will, no fool also will pursue that. So that is why, but still, that kind of joy, the joy that it's definitely better than rajas and tamas, but it attaches by the knowledge, the joy that knowledge or wisdom gives, that which comes out of purity, healthy, because it is a healthy type of joy. Anamayam. Amaya means health, means bad health or sickness. Anamayam. Anamayam means that which is healthy, opposite of unhealthy. So, healthy joy, something which gives, doesn't destroy you after enjoying that. If you indulge in certain things of the senses, ultimately it will catch up with you and it will lead you to some disease. But the higher joy of meditation or reading books and acquiring of knowledge, they are known as the Gita. He said not only it is prakashakam, which gives light, it is nirmalatvat, it is pure. Pure means transparent, and it is also healthy. So it's this is the definition of the sixth verse, which is the definition of sattva. So sattva is seen in higher animals, or highly not higher animals, higher beings. Even among human beings, there are people who are closer to animals than human beings, and among human beings, there are people who are closer to the sages or the divine beings than the animals. So Sattva guna, but one of the characteristic is it is pure. The more the purity in the glass, the more light. It is illuminative. It gives joy because of its clarity that it gives to one's life. The mind becomes clear. You understand what is good, what is bad, all those things. Sattva is transparent, and because it is transparent, it allows more of the light of Atman to shine through. But if it were to be opaque, if it were not to be transparent, then most of the light would not have passed through and it would not have given joy. So, transparency, nature to shine in a positive sense, not physically shine, but also clarity of mind, and also uh, the attachment to knowledge. The more knowledge, that's why people like to read more and more. They want a higher kind of knowledge. That the reading itself gives them joy. The art itself gives them joy. Somebody asked Yudhishthira. He said, why do you just watch at the Himalayas?" And he was sitting and watching the Himalayas. He said, "Himalayas doesn't give me anything. I'm not doing any kind of barter with the Himalayas. Just by looking at Himalayas, I get joy." So it doesn't have to give me something to give me joy. It doesn't have to give me gifts. It is just the purity of the vision of the Himalayas that gives me a higher joy. So that is what he says. The predominance of sattva in a being makes him open to higher forms of enjoyment. So what happens is the attachment is there, but the attachment is less compared to rajasic attachment, and tamasic is the worst. We'll come to that. So uh, it next verse, that is verse number 7, will explain a slightly lower guna, better than tamas, but it is known as rajo guna. So rajo ragatmakam vidhi. So what are the characteristics? Like we discussed the characteristics of sattva, that it is pure, it is anamayam, it is healthy, it leads to health, better physical health, better mental health. Anything that leads to a healthy mind and a healthy body is has to be sattvic. And also it gives light, it gives wisdom. Rajo ragatmakam vidhi trishna sanga samudbhavam tanni badnati kaunteya karma sangena dehina. So, how does the rajas bind? Sattva also binds, but it binds to higher knowledge, which is not bad. But still, it is bondage. So, that is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, or all the prophets say, that too much of reading books is not good, because they give you knowledge, they give you some kind of joy, but prevent you from the actual experience, the transcendence of the guna. So, sattva can bind you by giving an idea that reading good books and enjoying that, or singing and so many wonderful higher forms of art can bind us. But they bind in a very subtle way, they are not harmful. Whereas Rajas binds in a different way. Ragatmakam, it is known, Ragatmakam, Raga means passion. That which attaches through passion, Ragatmakam. And know that to be Trishna Sanga Samudbhavam. It is the source of all our thirst or desire and our intense attachment to the gross things. So that is Trishna Sanga Samudbhavam. Samudbhavam means it is born if you have inordinate desires. If the lesser desires you have, or the lesser confusion, or the more wisdom and light or wisdom one has, then one takes to sattvic pursuits, sattvic habits, and sattvic things and people. Whereas here, Trishna, the source of thirst and attachment, that which makes you uh, attached or desire such very some things of the world inordinately, that is rajas. Tat nibadnati, it binds. Kaunteya, Kaunteya means uh, son of Kunti, that is Arjuna. Arjuna, it binds how? Karma Sangena means that makes you hyperactive. Hyperactive or always run after karma. You know, after retirement, people yearn for retirement. They want to be in solitude. If they are really sattvic, they should enjoy their retirement. But if the rajas is not taken care of, then even after retirement, that can become a very painful state. You cannot stay in sattva if one is not sattvic. So they are attached by karma. That means they want to do more and more karma. They simply cannot be inactive even for a moment. If they are asked to sit, it is the worst punishment that can be given to them. They can't just sit. They want to get up, do something. Unless karma sangena, that is why they bind karma in a very subtle way. They will, in fact, such people, they will look down upon all the inactive people, though they may be sattvic. Of course, inactivity doesn't mean sattvic. We'll see how tamas also makes one inactive. But Rajasic people will always frown or look down upon inactive people because they themselves are restless. The restlessness, the thirst and attachment to acquire things, to acquire wealth, they think you're just wasting your money meditating, time and money by meditating. You should use this. It will bind you through some activity, or a desire to do more and more actions, because they believe that only an active person can survive in this world. And maybe for a Rajasic person, that is the goal of their life. And Dehinam means the embodied one. So one is inordinately attached to the body, not to the mind or the higher pursuits or the higher pursuits of life like knowledge, music, and many things which do not need the body to. It may need, of course, you need ears to hear the music, but they don't stress the body. So here the body is stressed because of the excessive work. So it is attachment to action, not that every active person is Rajasic. That mistake should not be made. In fact, who was more active than Krishna? Who was more active than some of the great, like Holy Mother, for example? She was working the whole day, but she was working out of sattva, out of freedom. It was not desire to work or desire to acquire certain things, desire to acquire power, desire to acquire wealth. If it is the desire to acquire, the thirst and attachment is there, then only that activity is bad. By itself, karma cannot bind, should not bind a person. Karma is very good if it is done in a sattvic, with a sattvic mind. We'll see that now in the next verse, seventh. So, this is normally in the Shvetashvatar Upanishad, it has been given colors. It is symbolically represented by red color. Red, those who like red or those who prefer the red color, that means they want activity. Whereas white is a sign of peace, silence. Bright white, in fact, reflects more light than the other darker colors. And of course, we'll come to the tamas, which is black, which is totally opaque. Red at least reflects some light. So know rajas to be the nature of passion, the source of thirst and attachment. It binds fast the embodied soul by one's attachment to action. So it instills in people desire to undertake more and more projects, to do more and more activities. They are not happy with one particular activity. Rather than doing one particular activity, they want to do so many things like multitasking, undertake new projects. They think that is the sign of life, that is the sign of creativity. So, similarly, the white cloth, Sri Ramakrishna gave this beautiful example. The white cloth, if it is colored red, it denotes this guna, the colors the jivatma red. Trishna or thirst, Trishna means thirst or desire, is the hankering of the mind after things that have not yet been acquired. Once you acquire it, we lose all the importance is lost. I mean, we are not happy with the things that we already have. We want things that we don't have. So this is typical of Rajas. Rajas always makes you hanker after a thing that you don't possess. If you already possess, it loses its value. We're not happy with, content with what is already with us. We may not even use it. So anyway, this Sangha is manifest as the act of clinging to objects which are visible, both visible as well as invisible. Sometimes invisible in the sense they are not intangible right now, but we have heard that acquiring this may make us happy and we run after it. Like going to heaven, for example. Nachiketa's father in Kathopanishad, you found that his rajas was so much that after acquiring everything that one can acquire in this world, he was not happy. He wanted to make sure that even after death, he will go to a heaven. So it can be invisible achievement or invisible attainment which one is thirsting after it, not necessarily material things. And then, as a fuel, in a fuel, if you add some, in a fire, if you add some more fuel, it increases the thirst or it increases the desire. So, fire is considered to be symbolic of fire or the burning fire of desire, they say. So, the more fuel you put into that, the idea of acquiring more, or the more it starts burning. That is the idea. Now we come to the last one, how tamas uh, binds a person. Rajas binds by more and more attachment and desires, or a desire to acquire things, both invisible and visible. Now, tamas binds in a different way. Tamas sattva, tamas sattva jnana ajam vidhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramada alasya nidra bihi tannibadnati bharata. Tama means inertia. The English word, the nearest translation is inertia, or uh, so that's why they say inanimate is the most tamasic. If it starts, if it is somehow stimulated and it starts manifesting it rajas, say for example a iron ball, when it is just iron, it is tamasic. When you heat it, when you give some energy to that ball, it becomes red hot. So the black becomes red. Coal, when it is heated, it becomes red. So rajas is slowly ignited. Similarly, here we'll find that inertia, or the things that basically exhibit some kind of inertia, it need not be inanimate object. That's why I said there are two types of people who like to live in solitude or just want silence. One is intensely sattvic, because they are already transcended rajas. They had their share of socializing and all those things in life. They are done with it. And now they want something higher. Then they are known as sattvic. Whereas there are other people who also are quiet, not because they cannot be rajasic. So Swami Vivekananda used to warn us that don't mistake sattva for tamas for and sattva. They look alike, but they are different in their the way they bind, the way they uh, bind the jiva. So that is why he makes very clear here, Sri Krishna, tamaha tu ajnanam, born of ignorance, whereas rajas is born of some kind of secular knowledge. Sattva is the higher knowledge. With the deluding, it deludes. It deludes you by thinking that it is it deludes sarva dehinam, all the embodied beings. By how does it delude? By pramada, alasya, nidrabhi, by heedlessness. Heedlessness means carelessness, just a happy-go-lucky attitude. Whatever, I mean, you're not careful about the what you are doing. The kind of carelessness that comes out of laziness. You are not bothered about the results, especially when it does not affect you. You're just careless. Say a doctor is operating. If he's careless, if he has pramada, then the patient will suffer. Similarly, alasya, that is indolence, that is the desire not to do anything. So apparently it looks like sattva. He wants to meditate or sit quietly, not because he is tired of rajas. If things of enjoyment are given, he will run after them. But since he doesn't want to acquire it with hard work, so that's why Swamiji says it's better, Swami Vivekananda said, it is better that one becomes a little rajasic and then he can hope to transcend tamas. So pramada, alasya and nidra, that is sleep, too much sleep. Tat, that binds fast, that binds a person fast. So it delivers, I mean, it creates some kind of a slothful attitude, become incapable of even rajasic things. So the goal is to transcend tamas, become rajasic. From rajas, once one has really excelled in whatever he does, and then he finds that even rajas is not enough to give him lasting happiness, then he goes to sattva and then he transcends. So all the three gunas now in this last verse, we'll discuss this verse and conclude. All the three gunas are collectively described again. Just to repeat, just to make sure that Arjuna has understood the three gunas, he says, Satvam sukhe sanjayati raja karmani bharata jnanam avrutya tu tamaha pramade sanjayatyutaha. Means it says sattva binds one to happiness. It's just summarizing what was said in verse number 6, 7, and 8. This is the ninth verse. So sattva, how does it bind? It binds you to a higher happiness. Sukha. Sukha means higher happiness. So rajas always doesn't give sukha. You see, in fact, it is in many cases, acquiring things, acquiring wealth is painful. People struggle day and night to acquire something, and it may be rajasic, but while you are acquiring, it gives pain. So only to enjoy the benefit of what desire has made you do, the action that you have done, you have to stop, at least uh, stop acting more and enjoy the benefits of the action that has given you so many things. But unfortunately, the rajas is so binding in nature that it will bind you eternally without giving you a chance to enjoy or have happiness. So sattva also binds by happiness. It's not that it doesn't have the capacity to bind, but rajas will bind you to more and more action, O Bharata, while as tamas verily wields knowledge and binds one to heedlessness. Then you are very careless, you are not thoughtful. You just do as you feel. So that is also a sign of tamas, not just inertia or laziness. Laziness is there, but you are heedless because you don't have the capacity to plan properly, work hard to acquire certain things, or even work hard to meditate and acquire sattva. When you don't have both rajas and sattva, it tamas binds you by your carelessness. So, the gist of this will conclude with that. Now, the next verse, before I conclude, we'll see what to expect in the next class. That now that he has defined the three gunas, they act on each other. That is the most important thing to understand. They never act in isolation. Nobody is fully sattvic, nobody is fully rajasic, nobody is fully tamasic. Though throughout the day he may fluctuate. So that means these three gunas are acting upon each other. So if you do some sattvic activity like meditation for some time, it has the tendency to refine your rajas or at least convert some of your tamas into rajas. Similarly, if you indulge in overactivity, then it has a capacity to disturb your meditative nature and bring you down, or it has a capacity to lift the tamas which made you inactive to make you active. So there is a positive side to all the gunas and a negative side to all the gunas. So how it acts over each other is something that you have to study. So he says, रजस तमश्चा भी भूय सत्वम भवति भारत रजस सत्वम तमश्चैव तमस सत्वम रजस तथा. So he says sattva asserts itself in a person by predominating over rajas and tamas. Only when you give up rajas, a little bit of rajas, a little bit of tamas, 100% it's not possible to get rid of. But Sattva has the power, if you develop it, it has the power over Rajas and Tamas. Rajas also has power over Sattva and Tamas. As I said, it can drag down Sattva, it can lift up a tamasic person. And Tamas also has power over Sattva and Rajas. It can drag both a Sattvic person or a predominantly Sattvic person, a predominantly Rajasic person can be degraded to a lower state. So each one asserts itself. If you allow one guna to assert itself, it can impact the other two. So all the three gunas are individually capable of influencing the other two in different ways. For example, as I said, If Rajas predominates, then it has the capacity on one side to remove the sattvic or the tamasic characteristic that you have. It will make you less lazy. At least you will, by your activity, by your forced activity or whatever it will remove all the tamas. But on the other hand, whatever little sattvic quality you had, it will drag it down. So you have to remember that this constantly takes place. So by turns, and what are the symptoms? So we have completed till 10 today. The 11th to 18th will tell what are the other characteristics. Now, what was explained was what was delineated was very brief. What are the principal characteristics? But they have specific characteristics. So it's not that it manifests only as light, only as purity, only as attachment to sukha. So it binds in other ways also. It has so many other emotions and other qualities. Liking for different food, we'll see how different gunas, how these gunas will impact how you eat, which are the things that you will like. So there are these symptoms or characteristics of these gunas from 11 to 18 Sri Krishna to make sure that Arjuna understands the basic principle behind sattva, rajas, and tamas and their impact, how they affect each other, and what are their characteristics in minute detail. He will discuss. And furthermore, you will find uh, in this chapter the Shraddha Traya, means what are the different types of faith that one generates. If there can be tamasic faith, there can be rajasic faith, there can be sattvic faith. So even the faith and all the other characteristics, the emotions that we have, these are impacted by gunas. So how it impacts and what are the different characteristics we'll discuss in the next class. So are there any questions? Yeah. Just tell me the name if you can. Yashoda Hazare. Okay. What is the question? How to identify whether, okay, the question is on YouTube, there is a question that how does one, you see, first we'll have to complete the discussion on 11th, this verse 11 to 18. There, many things will be clarified because now we have just defined briefly, first classified all the gunas into three basic gunas and define the primary characteristic, but there are secondary characteristics of each guna and the impact it has on our personality. So we will discuss it in that when all the gunas are discussed. But in general, I can say how can one uh, decide whether what we are doing is sattvic or not? It's very simple. The first definition of sattva is first it should be illuminating or it should give you wisdom. It it should lead to some kind of mental clarity. Clear. It's not that you do it with so much of doubt. Even a Rajasic person plans properly, but a Tamasic person is heedless because he doesn't know what to do, when to do. He just keeps on making mistakes because he is very, uh, you may say, reactionary. He is full of, the reactive mind is very prominent in him. He just goes on reacting in a very haphazard way. So definitely, you know that if you are not taking a well-informed decision, then it is tamasic or it may be rajasic also. Uh, but the main characteristic, three characteristics which are mentioned here. One, it should lead to purity. When you say purity, what does it mean? When I say I have a pure mind, it's a peaceful mind. Purity means the more desires there are, the more impure the mind is. Then it means it is full of rajas and tamas. But if it is sattvic mind, there is one pointed desire or one pointed activity which is known as it is known as Vishayatmika Buddhi. Ekeha Kurunandana. It's one pointed. Like you do japa, it's one pointed. You just can't jump from one mantra to another or one book to another. If that happens, then it is Rajasic because you are hyperactive. Here also you are intensely active, but it is one pointed. So one pointedness is a one of the characteristics. So if your mind is one pointed, it can do single tasking without attempting too much of multitasking. When you are doing one thing, you do it at a time with full of concentration, full of involvement in whatever you are doing, then it is a sattvika action. One. Second thing, it leads to peace. As we discussed that very definition, because it gives rise to clarity, it doesn't, the moment you start doubting any activity, if you do it full of doubt, then you can't enjoy that. So it will not lead to sukha or some kind of higher happiness. So if that is there, if there is some kind of definite purpose in what you are doing. So first, second, there is clarity in what you should do or what you should not do. That is, buddhi has been awakened. And third, it should be one pointed. Then only one can get peace, and then it leads to joy, which is a result of peace in life. Any more? Any questions? Attachment is?
Well, you said in the talk that we can be by sattva, by the sukha, by the
Yeah,
joy.
attachment to sukha. Attachment, just attachment is not binding because of sattva. Attachment to desires or attachment to any other thing is rajasic binding due to rajas. Whereas sattvic binds by, it binds you by giving you a certain kind of subtle joy. Yeah.
And
It makes you complacent.
complacent.
Yeah. That's why you see most of the Christian fathers, desert fathers and all, there is what is known as the dark night of the soul. So they didn't want just some temporary peace which will keep them relaxed, and they were struggling. And till they got the final enlightenment, they underwent a very, dark night, as they say. There was no light. I mean, they struggled. So by sukha can bind in that way that some kind of complacency comes in your spiritual effort. So you are happy. Oh, now everything is fine. But you don't realize that suddenly the situation may change. And because of that, the stability that you are feeling because everything is fine now may suddenly change. Whereas if you are fully established in sattva, then no matter what the external changes are, it doesn't disturb your mental balance. So it doesn't buy the joy. See, Holy Mother's life is a wonderful example. She learned to have this. She transcended the sattva, of course. She was capable of doing that because it was not just a very peaceful and quiet situation which she enjoyed sometimes, very rarely, when the crazy relatives were not troubling her. All the relatives were crazy. Wherever she went, the whole family went with her. So when that was not there, when she was alone, when she was meditating in the morning, she was not very complacent. She carried that same peace even when things around her were very disturbing. That is the sign. So she was not bound by the morning meditation, and then you get irritated when things around you don't work. So that is how you should not be attached to the peace you get. So sattva binds in a very subtle way. Then you try to give up all work. You don't try to find that peace when things around you are not in harmony. The idea is to get that peace irrespective of your situation. That is because she had transcended sattva. Otherwise, she would have always sought a place where everything is quiet, isn't it? She never sought that. People, of course, in the initial stages, many big sadhakas also do that. They go to solitude because they just want the mind to settle down. But at some stage, they return back. Return in the sense they are happy wherever they are. Whereas Holy Mother, if you see right from beginning, though she enjoyed her morning meditation, she was not bound by it. She didn't abhor the idea that she has to work, cook for other people, cook for her that Radhu, who were giving her trouble. She didn't try to avoid them also. She served as if she is meditating. It was an extension of her meditative life. So Sukha did not bind her. That is a subtle thing to understand, that Sukha can bind you by always making you hanker for a peaceful life, running away from uh, disturbed situations. Whereas if you transcend Sattva, which is difficult, it's easy to say, but in the initial stages, one may be tempted to take become sattvic. That is very natural. You want peace till your mind is settled or transcended. Once it has transcended, then whether rajasic people stay around you or tamasic people come and disturb you, you will not be influenced. That's the idea. So it binds in that way. Otherwise, the if somebody is bound to a very peaceful meditative life, what is wrong? Obviously, it looks ridiculous to say it is a bondage, isn't it? If somebody says, "Oh, you are bound to your peaceful meditation," then you will think that fellow is crazy. But it's true actually. Sattva binds because then you will always hanker for that small uh, portion in your life where you are peaceful. The moment you are out of that state, that joy which you got during meditation, you will find missing in other during other times when tamas and rajas predominate. So at that time, what will you do? So it that should not bind. You should not be bound even to sattva. Sattva can be used to progress and go beyond sattva. That will come to that when you discuss how the gunas interact with each other. Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpana.